In this vid, I'm going to be taking a look at a deck by MyseriousVoltorbX. He is the creator of the banner that you can find on my channel, so I was more than happy to do this video review for him. He submitted a deck featuring Mew and Gengar. It has a little bit of a twist with the Cinchino line, but what I've done is made a few suggestions on just making it a straightforward, get the Pokemon into the Lost Zone deck. I hope this will make it a little faster and make it playable in tournaments. While we haven't been seeing many Gengar variations in tournaments recently, I really think that they have a good shot. So let's take a closer look. The starters in this deck are one Manaphy and one Tyrogue. While I think this is an excellent choice, my personal preference lately has been just the single Cleffa. Not only does that give me an extra card in my deck for something else, but there's several advantages to the Cleffa. Yes, there's chances of being donked, but as there's other babies in this deck, you're already running that risk. The Cleffa is going to allow you to draw more cards, doesn't require an energy cost, and you can always use it to stall late game. While the line of Cinchino is very interesting in this Gengar deck, I think to make it as consistent as possible, it needs to be just focused more on that Gengar, or at least on the ability to put Pokemon in the Lost Zone in order to win via Lost World. So the first thing I would do is just drop the Cinchino line, which gives you 4 more cards in the deck. You have 2 Mew, so that you can use See-Off to put one of your own Gengar in the Lost Zone and start copying its attacks. This is great if you can't get a Gengar up and going right away, but because Mew only has 60 HP, you don't want to rely on that as a primary attacker. So I would definitely recommend increasing your line of Gengar to a 4-2-4. You're going to want the 4 basic Ghastly because with Pokemon Catcher right now, your Ghastlies sitting on the bench are going to be too easy of a target to just drag up and knock out. You also need the 4 Gengar because you're going to be putting one in your own Lost Zone with Mew, so you're going to need the other 3 to actually build up real Gengar on the bench. And there's always the chance that one Gengar is going to be prized. The great thing about Gengar decks is there's lots of other techs that you could add to make it work a little more consistently, as well as to have other options to put your opponent's Pokemon in the Lost Zone. You've hit on half of one of these techs by throwing in 2 Mime Jr. Mime Jr. allows you to put the top card of your opponent's deck into the Lost Zone. The perfect pair with that is Slowking, which allows you to look at the top 3 cards of either yours or your opponent's deck and rearrange them any way you like. You can easily move a Pokemon to the top of the deck and then see it into the Lost Zone with Mime Jr. So what I would recommend doing is trying to start off with a Mew to see off a Gengar, start putting Pokemon in the Lost Zone with the Mew, and then once you get a Slowking up on the bench, swap to Mime Jr. because not only can you possibly put Pokemon in the Lost Zone with Mime Jr., but you're also going to be disrupting them a little bit by controlling what they draw. While you're doing that, you should be able to build up a few Gengar on the bench. You run 2 Mr. Mime to allow you to look at your opponent's hand and see if there's any Pokemon in there that you can throw away with Gengar. And then you also run 2 Spiritomb, which can force your opponent to shuffle their hand back in case you don't see any Pokemon there with Mr. Mime. It's a good combination, but since these are just tech cards, and you're really not going to be attacking with them, if you find that you want to add other cards to the deck, you can always reduce this line to 1 Spiritomb and 1 Mr. Mime. Yes, there's a chance that with running 1, it'll be prized, but it's a pretty low chance. Next, let's take a look at your energy line. 20 energy in this deck is way too much. First off, I would drop the Rainbow energy because the only thing you're wanting to attack with is the Gengar and the Mew, so you only need the Psychic. Even 16 Psychic cards is a little bit on the heavy side. I would drastically reduce that down to maybe 8 to 10. While that may seem like a low number, you don't necessarily need all that energy considering that you can put Pokemon in the Lost Zone with Mime Jr., so you really only need 1 energy on Gengar and 1 energy on Mew. Yes, the more energy you have attached to them, the more you're going to be able to put in the Lost Zone in 1 turn, but you only need 6 Pokemon there. The only reason I'm even suggesting going as high as 10 is just whatever is comfortable for you. But I would personally sit closer to the 8 range and just make sure that you have a lot of cards to shuffle up in order to help you draw them. So now on to your trainers and supporters. First off, you need cards to search out basic Pokemon. Best card out there is Pokemon Collector. You'll need at least 3, if not 4 of them. If you don't have Pokemon Collector, you can always run Dual Ball, but Collector is definitely preferred. Since you're not going to be taking many prizes with this deck, since you're just putting Pokemon in the Lost Zone, you definitely want to increase your Twins from 2 to 4. Twins is going to be your main search engine. It's going to allow you to pull those energy out when you need them, the rare candy Gengar combinations, and whatever you happen to need. I would also increase your line of Seeker to 4, because if they don't have any Pokemon in their hand, you want to force them to pick up a Pokemon with Seeker so that you can throw it into the Lost Zone. Since I suggest that you increase your line of Gengar to a thicker, stronger, more consistent line, I would also recommend you increasing your line of rare candy to 3. I would add in one switch in case you have a sleeping baby in the active position and want to swap it out, or in case your opponent catches up something with a retreat cost to stall and you don't have the energy in hand to discard. I like that you run 2 catcher, and might even consider running a 3rd just so that you can drag up something that's not quite ready to attack or has a heavy retreat while you go ahead and you work around them. You run a lot of different Pokemon in this deck, and you're going to want to make sure that you have access to anything you need at all times. So I would definitely recommend adding in 3, ideally 4, Pokemon communication so that you can swap whatever you have that you don't need in your hand for something that you do. While I like the Revive, especially for getting out maybe some early knocked out Ghastlies in order to get them up to Gengars, or possibly a Mew late game, I don't think you need 2 of them. You also don't need 2 Flower Shops. 1 card to get Pokemon and energy back from the discard pile should be enough, and while yes, there is a chance that it could be prized, you are always going to be able to take a few prizes with Gengar with Curse Drop. Likely your opponent runs some sort of baby, Cleffa, low HP Pokemon, and so you might be able to get a prize or 2 and be able to send it off to the Lost Zone that way. Some other cards I think you can drop, the 2 Lost Remover and the 2 Life Herb. The way I play against this deck is I typically capture up Ghastlies and low HP Pokemon and knock them out as fast as I can, so I don't leave a lot of damage on the field to possibly be healed with Life Herb. Life Herb is also a very flippy card, so if you flip tails, it's pretty much just a wasted card. Even with some of these changes though, you're still running quite a few trainers, so I would include 3 to 4 junk arms so that you can get rid of cards that are just bunching up in your hand that you really don't need and can reuse what you've already used. Junk arm is great for reusing a card that you've only been able to draw into maybe 1 or 2 of. Right now, the only hand refreshers that you have, other than your Manaphy, are the 2 Professor Oak's New Theory. With some of the suggestions that I've added to this deck as far as reducing the number of cards that you have listed, I think you can easily find room to increase that line of Professor Oak's New Theory to 3, possibly 4, maybe adding in 1 Juniper in order to get a completely new hand, or even adding a Charon or 2 just to be able to draw into a little bit more. I hope these suggestions help your deck. While we haven't seen Gengar in very many tournaments in a while, I really think Lostgar or Mewgar or whatever you decide to call this still has a lot of potential. If you can get this to run a little more consistent, I think you'll find that you'll have an easy time of just putting 6 Pokemon in the Lost Zone and declaring yourself the winner. So if anyone else would like to see their deck reviewed, just PM me the list and let me know whether you'd like a blog review, which I can typically get done in about a week, or if you would like a video review. I have quite a long waiting list of video reviews right now, so it'll probably take quite a while, as in a few weeks, possibly even a few months. Therefore, if you like the immediate feedback, I definitely recommend going with the blog review. Thanks for watching!